I'd only ever loved one woman. I thought I'd never get to love another. Then Casey Pengelow climbed down from my roof, her smile brighter than the sun after the storm. With her, it wasn't about replacing a lost love, it was about discovering a new kind of love entirely. The first time her hand slipped into mine, the first time she whispered my name like a prayer against my neck, the first time I let myself get lost in the strength of another woman's arms, it was all a revelation. She showed me that a heart can love again without ever forgetting, and that a widow's love could be just as fierce, just as passionate, and just as queer as any other. Let's dive into today's story. Subscribe for support, I truly appreciate it, and catch a new lesbian story every day. The Gilded Joinery. The rain in Cornwall had a personality all its own. It wasn't the shy, misty drizzle of postcards. It was a relentless, horizontal assault, driven inland from the Atlantic by a gale that whistled through the eaves of the old widow's cottage and rattled the ancient windowpanes in their frames. Alex Vance watched it from her perch on the window seat, a half-empty mug of tea cooling between her hands. The world beyond the glass was a study in watery greys and greens, the cliff path swallowed by mist, the sea a roaring, unseen presence. It was a landscape of absence, which suited her mood perfectly. 2 years since Clara's passing, and the silence in the cottage had become a physical thing, a heavy blanket she wore every day. The silence, and the dust, and the slow, inexorable creep of decay that she felt powerless to stop. A leak had started in the ceiling of the library last week. A dark, ominous stain had bloomed above the bay window, and during heavy downpours, a persistent drip 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 would punctuate the silence, landing in a ceramic bowl she'd placed on the floor. It was the sound of things falling apart. Finally, spurred by a fear of the whole roof following suit, she had called the only carpenter in the village, Pengelow and Son. A crunch of gravel broke through the symphony of wind and rain. A vintage, moss-green Land Rover Defender, looking as though it had been assembled from parts salvaged from a shipwreck, pulled up outside. Alex's breath caught slightly. She hadn't expected anyone to come out in this weather. The driver's door swung open with a protesting squeak, and a woman jumped out. Not old Mr. Pengelow, and certainly not his son, who had moved to London a decade ago. This woman was tall and broad-shouldered, clad in worn, oil-stained jeans, heavy work boots, and a thick waxed cotton jacket, the collar turned up against the weather. A beanie was pulled low over her brow, but strands of hair the color of dark honey, whipped free by the wind, framed a face that was both strong and strikingly handsome. She moved with a confident, economical grace, pulling a heavy toolkit from the passenger seat before striding towards the cottage door. Alex found herself standing, suddenly self-conscious in her soft grey cashmere sweater and tailored trousers. She smoothed her hair, a sleek, dark bob that felt too polished, too city for this wild place, even after 2 years. The knock was firm, solid. She opened the door, and the storm rushed in, bringing with it the scent of salt, wet earth, and fresh-cut wood. "Alex Vance," the woman said, her voice a warm, low alto that seemed to vibrate right through Alex. "Casey Pengelow. You called about a leak." Up close, she was even more arresting. Her eyes were a clear, calm grey, like the sea on a still morning. Fine lines fanned from their corners, etched by sun and laughter. She had a strong, straight nose and a mouth that seemed on the verge of a smile. "Pengelow," Alex managed, stepping back to let her in. "I was expecting." "My dad," Casey finished, stamping her boots on the mat. "He's semi-retired. I've taken over the business. Hope that's all right." She shrugged off her jacket, revealing a faded flannel shirt stretched across capable shoulders. Her arms were corded with muscle, her hands broad and capable, with calluses and a few nicks and scars that spoke of a lifetime of working with wood. Alex found she couldn't look away from them. "Of course," Alex said, feeling flustered. "It's just the weather. I didn't think you'd come today." Casey's smile finally broke through, a transformative thing that lit up her whole face and made those grey eyes crinkle. "Roofs wait for no one, Ms. Vance. Especially not this one. Now, where's this patient of mine?" "Alex, please. And it's in here." She led the way to the library, a room that had been Clara's sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a deep bay window looking out to the turbulent sea, 2 worn leather armchairs positioned towards the fireplace. It was the heart of the home, and it had stopped beating the day Clara's had. Casey stepped inside and let out a low, appreciative whistle. Wow! This is some room. Her gaze wasn't on the leak, it was on the joinery, the shelves themselves. She walked over and ran her fingers along the edge of a shelf. Hand-cut dovetails. 19th century, maybe earlier. Beautiful work. You noticed the woodwork before the hole in the ceiling? Alex asked, intrigued. The hole is a symptom. The bones are what matter, Casey said, her attention finally lifting to the dark stain above. She pulled a powerful torch from her belt and shone it up into the corner, her expression turning focused, professional. Right. I'll need to get up into the attic space, have a look at the felt and battens from the inside. See where the water's getting in. Mind if I? She gestured towards the ceiling hatch. Please, go ahead. For the next hour, Alex tried to read, but her attention was constantly pulled away by the sounds from above. The sure, heavy footsteps, the scraping of wood, a low, tuneful humming that somehow soothed her. This woman, Casey, moved through her silent, grieving space with a vibrant, physical presence that was both unsettling and electrifying. Eventually, Casey climbed back down, a smudge of dirt on her cheek. Found it, she announced. A slipped slate and a cracked batten. It's a straightforward fix, but the rain needs to stop for me to do it properly. I've put a temporary patch on for now, so your bowl can have a rest. Thank you, Alex said, genuinely grateful. Can I offer you a tea? As a thank you. It's dreadful out there. Casey glanced out the window. It is that. I wouldn't say no. Black, no sugar, please. In the kitchen, Alex busied herself with the kettle, her nerves jangling. She was out of practice with this. With people. With anyone who wasn't a sympathetic neighbor or a shopkeeper. Casey Pengelow felt like a different species altogether. Solid, real, utterly at home in her own skin. Casey leaned against the counter, her presence making the large kitchen seem suddenly small. This is a wonderful old place, she said. Full of character. You've been here long. 2 years, Alex said, her back to Casey as she poured the boiling water. My partner and I bought it. She passed away shortly after we moved in. The silence that followed was different from the usual, heavy silence. It was filled with a sudden, profound understanding. I'm so sorry, Alex, Casey said, her voice soft. That's brutally hard. No one ever said it like that. They said sorry for your loss, a well-meaning but hollow phrase. Brutally hard felt true. It felt seen. Alex turned, handing her the mug. Their fingers brushed, and a jolt, swift and electric, passed between them. Alex's eyes flew to Casey's. The grey eyes held hers, and for a moment, there was no storm, no grief, just that startling, silent connection. Thank you, Alex whispered. Casey gave a small, gentle nod. I'll come back when the weather clears to finish the job. Probably tomorrow afternoon. She left soon after, the roar of the Land Rover fading into the sound of the wind. The cottage felt different. The silence was still there, but it no longer felt empty. It felt expectant. The next day, the storm had blown itself out, leaving a world washed clean and sparkling under a pale, tentative sun. True to her word, Casey returned in the afternoon. Alex heard the vehicle and her heart did a little, ridiculous flip. This time, Casey worked on the roof. Alex watched from the garden as she moved across the steep pitch with a fearless, practiced ease. She was a study in focused motion, her body a tool as precise and powerful as any in her kit. Alex found herself bringing out a mug of tea, not because it was polite, but because she wanted an excuse to watch her work, to see the play of muscle under the flannel shirt, the concentration on her face. Thirsty work. Alex called up. Casey looked down, shading her eyes with her hand. That smile again. Life-saving, she called back. She climbed down the ladder, wiping her hands on a rag. All done. Should hold for another 100 years. I doubt I will, Alex said, and then blushed at the inadvertent admission. Casey accepted the tea. You'd be surprised what these old places can withstand. She took a long drink. While I'm here, I noticed yesterday, one of the window frames in the library is starting to rot at the bottom. Probably why there's a draft in there. I could replace it for you. I have some reclaimed oak that would match the original. Alex looked at her, at the honest concern in her eyes. This wasn't just a job. It was care. Yes, she heard herself say. I'd like that. Very much. And so it began. Casey came back to replace the window frame. Then a squeaky floorboard in the hall needed fixing. Then a bookshelf in the library had become unstable. Each visit was a little longer. The conversations moved from the weather and the house to books, to art, to their lives. Alex learned that Casey had left Cornwall for a while, too, working on big restoration projects in Edinburgh. She'd come back to care for her ailing father and found she couldn't leave again. The sea gets in your blood, Casey said, planing a piece of oak with long, smooth strokes. Or the wood does. Or both. Alex told her about her life before, about London, about her career as an editor for a small publishing house. About Clara, a painter, whose dream had been this cottage by the sea, a dream she'd only gotten to live in for a few precious months. She must have loved it here, Casey said softly, not looking up from her work. She did, Alex said, her throat tight. She loved the light. Casey did more than fix things. She brought the house back to life. The smell of fresh wood shavings and beeswax polish began to replace the scent of dust and sorrow. The sound of her humming, her occasional laugh, the solid thump of her tools, these became the new sounds of the cottage. And with every visit, the current that flowed between them grew stronger, a constant, humming tension that Alex both feared and craved. One afternoon, Casey was under the sink, fixing a stubborn leaky pipe. Alex was kneeling beside her, holding a torch. The space was cramped, intimate. Alex could smell the clean sweat on Casey's skin, the scent of her shampoo. Just need to, there, Casey muttered, giving a final turn of the wrench. The dripping stopped. She shifted to get out and somehow, in the confined space, they ended up face to face, mere inches apart. Their breath mingled. Alex's gaze dropped to Casey's mouth. The air was thick, charged. Casey's eyes were dark, the grey almost swallowed by black. Her gaze was hot, intense. She slowly, so slowly, raised a hand and brushed a stray strand of hair from Alex's cheek. Her calloused thumb grazed Alex's skin, and a shiver ran through her entire body. Alex, Casey whispered, a question and a statement all in one. And then she closed the distance. The kiss was not tentative. It was acclaiming. It was firm and deep and tasted of tea and wild air. It was the answer to a question Alex hadn't let herself ask. Her hands came up, gripping Casey's strong shoulders, holding on as the world tilted. It was a kiss that held 2 years of loneliness, and it shattered her completely. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing heavily. Casey rested her forehead against Alex's, her eyes closed. I've wanted to do that since I first saw you standing in the rain, Casey breathed. Why didn't you? Alex whispered back. You were grieving. It wouldn't have been right. And now? Casey opened her eyes. Now it feels like the only right thing in the world. She kissed her again, this time more slowly, exploring her mouth with a devastating tenderness that made Alex's knees weak. Casey's hands, those strong, clever Carpenter's hands, came up to cradle Alex's face, her touch impossibly gentle. It was Alex who pulled back this time, her heart hammering against her ribs. The floor is hard, she said, her voice unsteady. A slow, sexy smile spread across Casey's face. Point me to a soft one. Hand in hand, they stumbled from the kitchen, down the hall, and into the library. The afternoon sun streamed through the newly repaired window, casting golden pools on the rug before the fireplace. Casey stopped, pulling Alex into her arms, and kissed her with a growing hunger that set Alex ablaze. Her hands roamed over Casey's back, feeling the powerful muscles through the soft flannel. I want to see you, Alex murmured against her lips, her fingers fumbling with the buttons of Casey's shirt. Casey helped her, shrugging out of the shirt and the white vest underneath. Her body was a revelation. Strong, sculpted shoulders, firm breasts, a flat stomach, and the smooth, tan skin of someone who worked outdoors. She was beautiful, solid, real. Alex's breath hitched. You're staring, Casey said, a faint blush on her cheeks. You're magnificent, Alex breathed, her hands coming up to trace the lines of Casey's collarbones, to cup the weight of her breasts. Casey's eyes fluttered closed at the touch, a low groan escaping her lips. "My turn," Casey said, her voice husky. Her hands went to the hem of Alex's sweater and lifted it over her head. She stilled, her gaze sweeping over Alex's lace-clad breasts, her narrow waist. "My God, Alex. You're the magnificent one." She lowered her head and captured one of Alex's nipples through the lace, sucking gently. Alex cried out, her fingers tangling in Casey's honey-colored hair, holding her close. The sensation was exquisite, a direct line of fire to her core. Casey's hands were everywhere, peeling away the rest of their clothes until they were both naked, skin to skin on the soft rug. The feel of Casey's body against hers, the smoothness of her skin against the roughness of her hands, the strength of her limbs entwined with Alex's softer ones, was intoxicating. Casey worshipped her with her mouth and hands, tracing every curve, learning her geography with a reverence that brought tears to Alex's eyes. "I've been so lonely," Alex confessed, her voice breaking as Casey's lips traveled down her stomach. Casey looked up, her eyes blazing with a fierce tenderness. "Not anymore." She settled between Alex's thighs, her touch finally finding the wet, aching heart of her. Alex gasped as Casey's fingers, those skilled, knowing fingers, began to circle and stroke her with an unerring precision that spoke of a deep, intuitive knowledge. "Casey, please." "I've got you," Casey whispered, her voice a vibration against Alex's skin. "Let go, my love. I've got you." And Alex did. The orgasm crashed over her with the force of the Atlantic storm, wave after wave of pure, blinding pleasure that tore a sob from her throat. She clung to Casey, her body shuddering, as the last of the tension, the grief, the loneliness, was wrung from her. Casey held her through it, murmuring soft endearments into her hair, kissing her temples, her cheeks, her eyelids. When Alex finally stilled, boneless and spent, Casey gathered her into her arms, pulling a woolen throw from the armchair to cover them. They lay there together as the sun set, painting the room in shades of orange and violet. Alex listened to the steady, strong beat of Casey's heart under her ear. It was a new sound, a rhythm of life and hope, and she knew, with a certainty that felt as solid as the earth beneath the cottage, that her life had just irrevocably changed. Underscore 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 underscore. The weeks that followed were a golden time, a stolen season of discovery. Casey's visits were no longer about repairs. They were about this new, fragile, glorious thing growing between them. They spent their days together. Alex would sit in the library, editing manuscripts, while Casey worked on a new project, crafting a dining table from a storm-felled walnut tree she'd found on the moors. The steady sound of her tools, the rasp of the plane, the rhythmic tap of a chisel, was the soundtrack to Alex's newfound peace. Their nights were for exploration. They were ravenous for each other, learning each other's bodies with a hunger that seemed insatiable. Casey was a generous, attentive lover. Her touch, so strong and sure during the day, became infinitely patient and delicate at night. She loved to take her time, to map every inch of Alex's skin with her lips and tongue, to bring her to the edge of pleasure again and again until Alex was begging for release. One night, they lay tangled in Alex's large bed, the windows open to let in the cool sea air. Moonlight streamed across the sheets, illuminating their naked bodies. Casey was propped on an elbow, tracing idle patterns on Alex's stomach. "Tell me something about you I don't know," Alex said, her voice lazy with contentment. Casey thought for a moment. "I play the cello." Alex turned to look at her, astonished. "You what?" Casey laughed, a low, rich sound. "Not well. My mum was a music teacher. She made me learn. I keep it in my dad's shed. It's terribly out of tune." The image of this strong, practical woman, her rough hands coaxing music from a delicate instrument, made Alex's heart swell with affection. "I'd like to hear you sometime." "You'd change your mind after 30 seconds, Casey grinned, leaning down to kiss her. "Your turn. Something I don't know." Alex was silent for a moment. "I'm scared," she whispered. Casey's playful expression softened. "Of what, my love?" "That this is too good. That I'm betraying her. By being this happy." Casey gathered her close, holding her tightly. "Oh, Alex. Grief isn't a room you leave. It's a companion you learn to walk alongside. And love isn't a betrayal. It's a testament. It proves that what you had with Clara was real, because your heart is still capable of it." She kissed Alex's hair. "She loved you. She would want you to be happy, to be loved." Tears streamed down Alex's face, but they were clean tears, healing tears. Casey's words were a balm on a wound she'd thought would never close. She believed her. Their love story wasn't without its challenges. The village was small, and people talked. Alex saw the curious looks when they walked together to the pub for a Sunday roast, Casey's hand resting possessively on the small of her back. But Casey's quiet confidence was a shield. She was a Pengalao, a respected part of the community, and her steady presence silenced any potential gossip before it could take root. Alex met Casey's father, a kind-eyed man with the same strong build and gentle manner. He took Alex's hand in his gnarled ones and said, "It's good to see this house lived in again. And it's good to see my girl smiling like that." The simple acceptance meant everything. One afternoon, they packed a picnic and hiked out to a secluded cove only accessible at low tide. The sand was white, the water a breathtaking turquoise. They swam in the icy sea, then lay on a blanket to dry in the sun. Casey turned onto her side, looking down at Alex, her expression serious. "I love you, Alex Vance." Alex's heart stuttered to a stop. She had known, of course. She felt it in every look, every touch, every moment of every day. But hearing the words was different. It was a vow. "I love you, Casey Pengalao," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "So much it terrifies me." Casey smiled, that transformative, beautiful smile. "Don't be terrified. Be with me." She reached into the pocket of her discarded jeans and pulled out a small, clumsily wrapped package. "I made you something." Alex sat up, taking it. Inside, nestled in a bed of wood shavings, was a hair comb. It was carved from the same dark walnut she was using for the table, its surface polished to a silken sheen. The design was an intricate, flowing pattern of waves and Celtic knots, breathtaking in its detail and craftsmanship. "Casey, it's exquisite," Alex breathed, turning it over in her hands. "I've never seen anything so beautiful." "It's for your hair," Casey said, her cheeks flushing with pleasure at Alex's reaction. "I pictured you wearing it. I thought the wood came from this land, from our land. It should be yours." Our land. The word settled deep inside Alex, a sense of belonging she hadn't felt since Clara died, or perhaps ever. She turned her back to Casey. "Put it on me." Casey's hands were gentle as she gathered Alex's dark hair and secured it with the comb. When she was done, she kissed the nape of Alex's neck, sending a fresh shiver down her spine. "How does it look?" Alex asked. Casey turned her around, her grey eyes dark with love and desire. Like it was always meant to be there. She leaned in and kissed her, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of salt and sunshine and a future Alex had never dared to imagine. The sun warmed their skin, the waves whispered on the shore, and in that hidden cove, with the woman she loved, Alex felt the last of her grief finally, peacefully, release its hold on her heart. She was not a widow anymore. She was a woman in love, being loved in return, and her story was just beginning. Conclusion. Alex Vance's life in the old cottage by the Cornish sea began as a monument to loss, a house filled with silence, dust, and memory. But with Casey Penhallow's arrival, that silence transformed into music. The steady rhythm of hammer and chisel, the warmth of laughter, the whisper of love rediscovered. What began as a repair to a leaking roof became something greater, the careful restoration of Alex's heart. Casey's strength and tenderness, her reverence for the past and devotion to the present, gave Alex permission to love again without betraying the memory of Clara. Together, they wove something new, not a replacement for what was lost, but a love rooted in resilience, honesty, and desire. Their days filled with craft and companionship, their nights with passion and intimacy. The community came to see them not as a curiosity but as a truth, two women who belonged to each other, and to the land they lived on. In the end, Alex no longer measured her days by silence, but by the sound of Casey's voice, the weight of her hands, the steady beat of her heart. The widow's cottage was no longer a tomb of grief, it was alive again, golden at the joins, more beautiful for having been broken and mended. Alex's story wasn't one of endings, but of beginnings. Proof that love, like wood or stone, can endure storms, and that sometimes the most unexpected repairs are the ones that save us.